Well, I've always been an artist. I was an artist as a child. I think I took it a little more seriously than many children do because it was one of the few things I got any praise for. And I've just come to realize over my lifetime that that is a big factor. I think that people tend to do the things that they get approval for. I believe they call that reinforcement in psychology. But after I married an artist. My first husband was an artist, and that was a great asset to me because all of my friends then were artists. They were people who took art seriously. That makes a big difference in what your aim is and what your goal is. You can use art in many ways. You can use it as a very wonderful hobby, I suppose, is a word that is not very much appreciated, but avocational, I guess, is a better word. Or you can take it very seriously and try to make some kind of a career of it. I ended up trying to make a career, although my career was always somewhat determined by the possibilities around me. I didn't do the things that perhaps I should have done to try to advance myself, just because I was never quite sure that it was worth it. I thought of my art in more personal terms, I suppose, the rewards that came to me personally, which were satisfying. I started out with the usual stuff, but I think the first art that I did, the first art that I have in the retrospective show are the landscapes. And I had been doing abstractions before that because I had a very good teacher, Cameron Booth, at the University of Minnesota, who turned me on to abstraction and made me see what abstract art was all about. This painting is an example of my abstract expressionist period, and it's kind of a good painting to use to talk about what abstract expressionism was about, at least in my experience. There are no created forms in this painting. Everything comes from the brush mark, and the brush mark is used to try to establish a space. That, for me, abstract expressionism was about space and the manipulation of paint on a surface so that you get that sense of space kind of shimmering, moving back and forth. I feel kind of sorry sometimes when I hear younger people denigrate abstract expressionism because I don't think anybody's ever shown them that how exciting that manipulation of space can become, especially when you limit yourself to something as purist as simple brushstroke. But after that, I did that for quite a few years, and then I began to think that I was running out of ideas. I kept pulling into myself all the time, which is one of the faults of abstract expressionism. It tends to take you in. And you get to, at least in my case, I got to using the same forms over and over again. I got a little bit dissatisfied with it. So we went to Mexico to spend a year in Mexico. And the children and my husband and all of us went down there. And I decided while I was there that I was going to paint something else. So I started doing landscapes. It was easy to get up in Mexico. It's easy to get up high so that you could see these big panoramas, and I got interested in that. Well, that turned into a kind of universalized landscape that I started to do after I came back from Mexico. Well, this landscape, now this is about 10 to 12 years later after the abstract expressionist painting that I just showed you. And this was done from some sketches that I did out on the California coast. Now you can see that I'm still painting a lot of space, and but now I'm organizing it with things that I see, and I I'm very satisfied with this because it's got that floating quality, which is, I thought, kind of hard to achieve in a landscape done from an actual place. After I got those landscapes quite well developed, and I started doing these big aerial things, which were really kind of abstractions. But after I stopped doing that, I went into some figure painting. Well, that sort of started in Mexico too, because I had chances to do portraits of people that were around. But I stopped, when I started into figure paintings, I really quit doing portraits. In fact, I tried consciously to stay away from portraiture and to make a sort of a generalized figure, which was almost like a choreography. I wanted to plan these compositions with people in them, and I'll have some to show you. I also got some ideas from the London subways, where we spent a summer in London, and I really got turned on to the subways. The subways were full of all kinds of fascinating people, and because it was the summer that Rhodesia broke off from Great Britain, and a lot of the people who had worked for the colonial government came and lived in London. They had their tribal costumes on, and they were really wonderful. Well, as it turned out, I don't think I've got any paintings left of people in the tribal costumes, but at any rate, it turned me on to the possibilities of subway crowds, which I used for a long time. This is one of the first paintings I did of the figures. It's of people in a London subway. Yeah, I saw these men with the Texas hats, which amused me. At the time, I wanted very much to start doing some compositions of using figures almost in a choreographic way. And I think this was the first one I did that I felt really got what I was after. I still feel pretty much that way about it. I like this painting about as well as any of the figures that I did. From the people, I went back to abstraction. And I started doing some things that were, they were what one might call elements. You know, one of my dealers called them elements. They were bars that hung on the wall, and I developed them kind of because I thought it would be good to have something that could be hung in a place that you went past, like the hallway. That's where some of my work ended up, and you couldn't see it very well from a distance. So I thought, well, that's an idea. So I started doing some of that, and I have an example of that in the show. And from that, I went to some big textile paintings, which I got kind of turned on to by my daughter. These were simultaneous, actually. The bars and the textile paintings I did those kind of simultaneously. My daughter was doing some wonderful things with textile collage, really. She was making garments, but they were textile collages. And I really thought, oh, there's a great idea. So I did some paintings from them, and I developed that into a idea for some large paintings. The textile paintings lasted for about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. All of this stuff seemed to last about 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and then I'd go on to another thing. I wasn't doing all this stuff simultaneously, you understand. I kind of got into it until I thought that I had done as much as I could. Sometimes I left it in disappointment. I left the figures in certain kind of disappointment, partly because I didn't think they were much appreciated by other people, and partly because I felt I hadn't done with it exactly what I wanted to do. Now that I look back at them, I think they're probably all right, and I don't feel that they're such I don't feel they're failures in any case to them. I just think, you know, they are what they are. This is one of a series of paintings that I did that were based on the textile collage idea that I got from my daughter Amy in the things that she was making. It sort of fell in with a period of painting that was going on then called pattern painting, but And I don't, deny that that is a relationship or is a close relative, but my painting's got more space in it. The pattern painting that I was aware of did not have particular interest in space, and I think I still do. I see a lot of space in that painting. But I went from the textile paintings to something called ghost maps. I got the idea, of the cities. This was much later, and we were beginning to get a lot more different kinds of people in our society than I was used to seeing, and there were many more Asian people. And then everybody seemed to be developing a kind of an identity that that I felt made up America. And I really feel very strongly about that. I think what America is a lot of different kinds of people. So I thought of all of the things that are around an old city like New York that are remnants of the cultures that lived there before, and how they keep changing and building on one another, and they just kind of cover over each other. So that was sort of what I did in the paintings. I covered over things. And they're made of symbols, some of which are not particularly, I didn't really borrow them from different cultures, but I made up things that were reminiscent of them. And people look at those paintings, they say, oh, well, that's from the Maya. Well, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, because I found one thing for sure. The different people over the whole face of the earth make a lot of very similar marks when they begin to develop their symbols. And I've got it full of a lot of stuff that looks like Arabic writing or shorthand, good old Greg shorthand. So, which I learned in high school. Now, these paintings were things I called ghost maps. I did a lot of them. This was actually painted as the left panel of a set of 3 that was much larger. It was the one in the middle was 84 inches long, and so when the whole thing and they're all 50. Yeah, these 2 are 50. So when it all got extended, it was 184 inches long. That was pretty good for me. But what they're about is the idea of multicultural symbols and that occur in our society. But actually, when I got through with them, at the time I felt, that I was getting something like that on there, but when I get through with them, they look like aerial views of cities. So I'm back where I started, huh? More space. This is one of the ghost maps that I painted in a more flat color way. And there's more attention to the little figures that are in it than in some of the others. I've always been quite interested in the idea of turning geometric figures into animated things that have an identity of some kind, and I found out that it isn't terribly hard. If you put 2 dots and you've got eyes, and it looks like a creature of some kind. But you can see there's a little Mayan temple up there, and the little creatures that are going up to it, and different figures that came partly from that experimentation with simply using geometric figures in a way that animated them. Then, so the ghost maps were, they really involved my attention for quite a while. I did a lot of drawings, which I think were maybe some of the best. Then I went from them to what I call a transitional thing. I don't have any better name for it. It's a transitional painting, which is a transition between the painting on a flat surface and something that I went into later, which is cut cutout constructions. And I call these transitional paintings. I have one here, which I'm going to show them. And then I went into these gator board things, which were actually pieces cut out that were like what I was trying to represent on a flat surface. From them, I went to things that would stand by themselves, because I had a friend who, I was making some little pieces that were box-like things that stood by themselves, and they did kind of look like houses. I didn't really intend them to, but that's what they turned out to be. So I have a friend who is a sculptor, and she helped me to make big ones, because I wanted to make one big enough that I could walk into. So she helped me, and I made these things, and I called them casitas, which is the Spanish word for little houses, just because I couldn't think of anything else to say. And I think I was looking for something that I could relate those to. You know, I was kind of wondering, where did this idea come from? Because I think lots of times artists do things, and they're not exactly sure where the idea comes from until after they get it done. At least that's certainly true of me. I never know what I'm doing until I have done it, and then I look at it and I begin to see where some of it came from. But when I lived in Mexico City that year, and I did a lot of painting up on the roof, I looked around the city and I saw all of these little rakish little huts constructed up there that were made by the people who came to work in the buildings. They came from rural Mexico. And in their villages, many times, or their farms, they had a little palm thatched hut constructed as their kitchens. And as an American said to me, theoretically the smoke in these things goes out the top of the thatched roof, but but for an American it hangs about eye level. Anyway, that's what they were. They had constructed these little huts to use as an auxiliary to their living quarters, which in those days were on the roofs of the apartment buildings in Mexico City. So later I saw these same little casitas, if that's what you could call them, constructed in the empty lots of the poor neighborhoods on the Lower East Side in New York. People there would take the places that they had, where buildings had been torn down, and make a garden. Then they'd make one of these little huts and they'd go sit in it. I don't know. To me, I think it's kind of the same idea, you know. You create something. I like that because I like it when I like to see what people build. I think it's the best thing we do. And that's really the latest work. I made some trees to go along with the casitas because somebody suggested to me that I do that. It seemed like it helped. I guess I could make a whole village if I had a space to put it in. I'd rather like to. They're fun to make. Take a lot of time, but they're fun to do. Well, that's up to date. Up to date 1993. Trees I was telling you about. We've got them against some real trees here. It's one of the casitas I was telling you about. And here's the inside of this casita. They're plain on the outside and decorated on the inside. See, here's the inside of the blue casita. This is the blue casita. The back of it. And over there against the vines are the trees again. They're my favorite. Over there in those vines I like. This is one of the maquettes that I used for the big casitas that I talked about. It's another view of it. This is another one of the maquettes. This one's called Turtle House. It's another view of Turtle House. I never actually made any big ones exactly like these, but yeah, I think you could see that the general idea is there. This one is probably closer to what I did with the big ones than any. You can see I used that shape at the top quite a lot. And this is the other side of it. This is called Talk, Talk, Talk. Here is a view of one of the casitas, the red one. You can see a little bit of the interior of it. And this is one of the ghost maps. This is my largest ghost map. It's 15 feet 4 inches long. And it's in 3 pieces, so I can handle it. It's called Big Blue Ghost Map. This is another ghost map. I think this one is called Armenian Waltz Ghost Map. It's one of the first ones I did. So some of the animated figures and stuff that I talked about, perhaps a little more obvious. And if there's a Statue of Liberty, she was a big deal that year. This is one of my books that I made. This one has a theme of human versus human. It's got a lot of social comment of a rather oblique kind, isn't it? There's a bunch of Maya people. There's some slaves. A lot of ghosts sailing over the populace. They aren't scary ghosts, so they're they look like rather jovial type ghosts. And I guess I'll end up with a view of sunbeams on copper cage, which they hung from the ceiling in the west corridor, right inside the entrance, up against the ceiling.